Hello everybody, welcome back. In this video, we are continuing with our series on supply and demand. We looked at competition in the last video and how that's necessary to analyze economic phenomenon in a supply and demand framework. In this video, we're going to look at the demand side of things and how define demand, quantity demanded, look at a demand curve, and then talk about the things which cause a demand curve to shift. So let's jump into that now. Starting with our definition of quantity demanded. Let me first note by saying that I often abbreviate quantity demanded with QD. And this is the amount of a good that buyers are willing and able to purchase at a given price. So the amount of a good that buyers are willing and able to purchase at a given price. Okay, so demand, we are on the buy side, talking about the buyers here, and this does need to be both willing and able. So you might be willing to buy something, but not able, or able to buy something, but not willing to, and this is what constitutes quantity demanded. Our law of demand states that this is the claim that quantity demanded, I'll abbreviate that, quantity demanded of a good falls when the price of the good rises. When the price of the good rises, and then at the end here, all else equal. And this all else equal bit, also the same as a Latin phrase called ceteris paribus, meaning all else equal. So holding constant everything else, incomes, the prices of other goods, number of buyers and sellers, and so on, if the price rises for a good, quantity demand follows. Quantity demanded of the good falls. And so this is one of the few what we consider laws within economics that holds almost all the time, not only within humans, but this even follows within animals. So the law of demand, when things get more expensive, people want less of it, right? And we're going to see this through the demand schedule. This is a table that's showing the relationship between price and quantity, and that ultimately creates the demand curve. So we'll see that on this next page. The demand curve is plotting the demand schedule, plotting the points on this table to show that when there's a price change, we change the quantity demanded, and it's going to be a movement along the curve. So if we take this coffee example, Helen's demand for lattes, just a singular demand curve. At a low price, at low prices, we have really high quantity demanded. So at a price of 0, Helen is taking 16 coffees. At a price of 1, Helen is taking 14. We continue on down until we have a price of 6. Helen wants 4 coffees. So if we were to plot all of those, we get this demand curve for Helen. So this is Helen's demand for coffee. We are talking about markets, and particularly in a market for something like lattes or coffee, particularly in large cities, you have a lot of options, a lot of buyers, and a lot of sellers. So Helen is just one buyer. We need to aggregate this out to the whole market. So we had Ken's demand in here. We had every single person's demand in here. And so at each price, we look at the quantity demanded for all the market participants. And in this case, these are just going to add up 21, 18. It's going to be going down by 3s, 15, 1296. Okay, and then we can plot that. So we plot the price with the market quantity demanded in order to get the market demand curve. So we're starting up here about 24, moving down to 21, and finally down here at a price of 6, we have a quantity demanded of 6. So demand curve for the market looking like this. So they are downward sloping, and as we can see, as the price increases, the quantity demanded falls right along here. So that's the market demand curve. Let's look at what things in the economy affect that demand curve. So remember, our law of demand was the claim that the quantity demanded of a good falls when the price rises, other things equal. So this other things equal assumption at the end, or condition at the end, is talking about all the other things other than the price that's going to affect the demand for something. So maybe pause for a second and think about what affects your demand for coffee, or your demand for computers or cars, or whatever it might be, your demand for education. And so we're going to go through those, but think about those for a second. So the first one we're going to talk about is the number of buyers. And we'll go through each one of these, so I'll just kind of state them here at the beginning first. So the number of buyers, people's incomes affect their demand for goods and services. Incomes, the prices of related goods. Here we're talking primarily about substitutes and complements. Okay, the prices of related goods. Two more, tastes and preferences. So if you paused the video and thought about things that might affect your demand, and you think about things like quality, or the season of the year, or your location, things like that, all of these sorts of things would fall into tastes and preferences. And then the last one is expectations. Okay, these are the demand curve shifters. So if these things change in a way that increases demand, it's going to shift the entire demand curve to the right, and then vice versa. So let's dive into each one. First, the number of buyers. This one is pretty straightforward. If you have more people in a market, suppose wherever you're living, the population doubles next year. So the people who, say, buy coffee, if we're talking about the market for coffee, there are some people who like their $1 coffees, $2 coffees. Maybe if you're living in a bigger city, you might be able to buy $4, $5, $6 coffees. But if you double the amount of people living in the place, you're going to increase the number of buyers. There are going to be more people who like those $1 coffees, more people who like the $2, $3, $4, $5, $6 coffees. So at every single price, the quantity demanded increases. And if the quantity demanded increases at each price, it's an entire shift in demand, an entire increase in demand, and the demand curve shifts right. Okay, and you could also call this an outward shift. I guess I'll put that in parentheses here. But I find it easiest to just think about supply and demand curve shifts as shifting to the right if it's an increase, and to the left if it's a decrease. That's even more important when we're talking about supply. Instead of moving the curves up or down, if there's an increase or a decrease, think about moving them to the right or to the left. So the quantity is moving up if it's going to the right. The quantities demanded and supplied are moving down if they're going to the left. Okay, so that's our first demand curve shifter. This one is, I think, one of the more apparent ones. If you have more people as a part of the market, there's going to be a greater demand. So number of buyers. Okay. Yeah, just a notation note. I put D0, D0, D1. I put D0 and D1 to denote each demand curve shift. If I were to draw another shift, I'd draw another demand curve over there in D2. Okay, so that's the first demand curve shifter. Let's look at the next one, the number of, not the number of buyers, income. So we have two cases for income. For most goods, which we're going to call normal goods, if your income increases, if generally the incomes in the market increase, the demand goes up. So an increase in income increases the quantity demanded at each price. Just like last time, all of those price increases are going to result in an entire shift of the demand curve, an increase in demand. That's for normal goods. So again, things like coffee, cars, computers, and so on and so forth. Things that we like to have, and when our incomes go up, more people consume them, and we consume more of them. So a combination of more consumers with higher incomes and more purchases among each individual consumer as their income increases. Okay, that's for normal goods. We have something else called an inferior good. These are things which, when your income increases, you buy less of. And the most classic example of an inferior good would be that of ramen noodles, or generally take any other kind of college dorm food, right? Or also generic items, food or clothes. As your incomes increase, generally speaking, people buy fewer generic branded goods and move to name brands. So name brands would be normal goods. Generic items are potentially inferior goods. Okay, but ramen is the classic example. As your income increases, you buy less ramen noodles. So if there's an increase in income, demand curve shifts to the left. So D1, demand shifts to the left. Okay, moving to the next. The prices of related goods. So here we also have two cases, substitutes and complements. We'll start with substitutes. Our definition for that is that two goods are substitutes if an increase in the price of one good, if an increase in the price of one good causes a decrease in the demand for the other. Causes a decrease in demand for the other. Okay, so an example here, pizza and hamburgers. Things that we can think of as being substitutable for each other. So if the price of pizza goes up, people are going to shift away from pizza toward their substitute, and in this case, hamburgers. So price of pizza goes up, people are going to consume less pizza, and the demand for hamburgers will increase, shifting the demand curve to the right. So here, we're talking about the demand curve for hamburgers. So this is the price of hamburgers and the quantity of hamburgers. We don't observe the price of pizza on this graph, but if the price of pizza increases, people switch away from hamburgers and toward, if the price of pizza increases, people switch away from pizza toward hamburgers. So the demand for hamburgers will increase if there's that increase in the price of pizza. Okay, a couple more examples of substitute goods, Coke and Pepsi. You could take skis and snowboards, for example. Cars and public transportation would be another example. Things like this. Okay, substitutes. Complements are similar, but just quite the opposite in their definition. So two goods are complements if an increase in the price of one good, if an increase in the price of one good causes a decrease in demand for the other. Causes a decrease in demand for the other. Okay, so the main difference here is that substitutes, if the price increases for one good, it's going to cause an increase in demand for the other. Complements, things that go together, if there's an increase in the price of one good, it causes a decrease in the demand for the other. Okay, so computers and software, they go together. If the price of computers rise, people buy fewer computers and therefore also less software. So here, if we're talking about the demand curve for software and the price of computers goes up, people buy fewer computers, people therefore buy fewer or less software. Okay, some more complementary goods: college tuition and textbooks, bacon and eggs. Another classic example would be peanut butter and jelly. Another one where we have kind of three complementary goods all going together would be graham crackers, marshmallows, and chocolate bars, right? So things that go together are complements. If the price of one good increases, all of their complementary goods demands decrease. Okay, complements. Two more. We'll talk about tastes and preferences. Generally, anything that increases someone's preference or someone's taste toward a good is going to increase their demand. Atkins diet, low carb, increased the demand for eggs back in the 90s. Another, if you take kind of locational differences, the demand for flip-flops is going to be higher closer to the beach than in the mountains, say. And one more, take seasonal preferences. The demand for ice cream will be higher in the summer than in the spring. Okay, so I'm not going to draw the curves there, but increase in demand shifts to the right, and vice versa. Last one is expectations. Also, not going to draw a graph here, but same mechanics apply. If people are expecting something to happen in the future, that can affect their demand for things now. And so, for example, if the economy is booming and people are expecting their incomes to rise, their demand for restaurant meals and maybe new cars will increase now, expecting that future return. So an example, people in law school, for example, might buy a new car. Even though they're still a student, they're still not making money, they're paying tuition, but they might buy a car now, take out a loan, because they're expecting this higher income in the future. And the same when the economy is doing poorly, right? So expectations about the future affecting demand today. Okay, so that's it for the demand section. In the next video, we're going to talk about supply. And so stay tuned for that. And I hope to see you there. Thanks.